The Second Sun Series, Part 7, The Mystery of the Primeval Sun. A quick recap of Saturn symbolism. And does Bo know? To begin today's video, I wanted to do a quick recap of all the Saturn symbolism that we've already covered in the previous videos. Amun-ra, Ra, Osiris, Shamash, Sol, and Helios were all names of the primeval sun Saturn. The names once applied to the second sun, the primeval sun, or the night sun, when it reigned in the north sky close to the earth in ancient days, in a time that was known in the myths as the Golden Age. At that time, Saturn was fixed in the north sky, and its purple glow illuminated the ancient day, which is now known as night. The names Amun-ra, Ra, Osiris, Shamash, Sol, and Helios became associated to the sun we now know today after the reign of Saturn ended. Traditionally, the Romans had woolen ropes tied around the feet of their Saturn statues in the temples. But during their winter festival, Saturnalia, these bounds were loosened, symbolizing Saturn being set free from its fixed position in the north sky. You'll see other depictions of Kronos and Saturn as being seated. This symbolized that at one time, Saturn was fixed in the north sky. The Gnostics believed that the creator god of the Old Testament was an evil demiurge, a lesser god, and completely separate from the supreme God of grace who sent Messiah. In the early centuries of Christianity, the Gnostics were heavily persecuted. They were hunted down. A lot of them were killed for these beliefs. Were the early Gnostics silenced because of their knowledge of the truth? Messiah's words to the Pharisees, John 8:44, "Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it." The Egyptian god Kneph is associated with Amun, the primeval sun. He's shown as being a serpent or a serpent coiled around an egg. If you look in the bow of his body here, I believe it's a representation of the ring of Saturn, or rings of Saturn. Sometimes it's shown as multiple snakes. Kneph is related to the Hebrew word kanaf. In Hebrew, kanaf means wing, and there's many verses that talk about the shadow of the wings being under the protection of the shadow of the wings, the kanaf. Kneph is related to Yaldabaoth by way of the Greek theonym for its name, Knuphis. Kneph symbolism next to Yaldabaoth. In part 2 of this series, we examined an alternate account of the story of the Exodus from Egypt from the Egyptians' point of view. Moses in this account was an ex-Heliopolis priest. Heliopolis is the ancient city of Amun-ra, another name for the primeval sun. The cult of Minivis was also prominent there. Minivis is the black bull with the solar headdress symbol, another symbol for the black sun, Saturn. In part 6 of this series, we looked at the bronze serpent story and how the bronze serpent being raised on the pole was possibly just another symbol for Saturn, or the demiurge, Yaldabaoth, in the sky. They had to look to the image of their god, the serpent symbolizing the rings of Saturn. There are two accounts of the staff being transformed into a serpent. First, the staff of Moses was turned into a serpent by his God to show him his power. And then Aaron's staff was transformed into a serpent to battle with the Pharaoh's magicians, who also used the serpent. This confrontation in the Egyptians' account was just a religious quarrel between the cult of Heliopolis, both using the same power of their gods, the serpent symbol, going back to Saturn. The barge of Ra, with a serpent encircling the boat, symbolizing the rings or ring of Saturn. The Egyptian god Kneph, wrapped around the egg, another Saturn symbol, next to Yaldabaoth, the Gnostic demiurge. In part 1 of this series, we talked about how Apollo's lyre was very similar to Hathor's headdress, another primeval sun symbol, and how Apollo's lyre could have been symbolic of the age of Saturn, or Kronos. With it being a musical instrument, it could also be tied to the sounds coming from Saturn, which you can search online for and find the sounds emanating from Saturn. In the myth of Apollo, it was said that he rode a swan or swans to the land of Hyperborea, which sat at the very edge of the ocean. I wonder if this is a reference to a trip to Saturn, going up to Saturn. The Menevus symbol, the black bull, a symbol of the black sun, Saturn. The cult was prominent at Heliopolis, the city of Amun-ra, another name for Saturn. David's harp and Apollo's lyre. Could these instruments both be symbolic of the rings of Saturn and the sounds that emanated from the primeval sun? The black cube is another ancient symbol going back to the planet Saturn, the primeval sun, the black sun. On the left, you have the Jewish tefillin, a small wooden black cube that's filled with Torah parchment for their prayers. In Mecca, for Islam, you have the Kaaba, which is considered the house of God. They make pilgrimages to it and walk counterclockwise around the black cube. In ancient days, in the North sky, this would have been a mirroring because the hexagonal storm cloud turns counterclockwise. And on the right, you have the prayer shawls of the Hebrews. The Hebrew word kanaf was used for the commandment for putting the fringes on the corners of their clothing and on the shawls. So whenever they stretch this out over their heads, it's symbolic of the shadow of the wings that they would have witnessed in the ancient sky, the wings or the rings of Saturn above them. The Hebrew word for the center light of the menorah is shamash. Shamash is another name for the primeval sun, going back to the Mesopotamian sun god. When lit, the menorah would cast the shadow of the rings of Saturn. That's why the Star of David, the six-pointed star, it goes back to the North Pole of Saturn, is underneath the Shamash candle, another name for the Mesopotamian sun god, going back to the primeval sun, Saturn. Remember that Saturn lit up the ancient sky at night with a purple glow. The obelisk is an ancient symbol from Heliopolis that goes back to this light being cast from Saturn. The obelisk also pointed up to the six-pointed star symbol, which originated from the hexagonal storm cloud of Saturn. The shadow of the rings also form the shape of black bull horns, explaining the minivist form of amun-ra, the primeval sun. Amos 5:25 through 26 references that in the desert they took Sikuth, Wolkin, and Kiyun, the star of their god. Sikuth and Kiyun are both ancient words that go back to Saturn. It's not a coincidence that the national menorah is set up next to the Washington, D.C. monument. Since Carter was president, every president since has lit the menorah. I've added the obelisk to the image on the left so you can see how the architecture in Washington, D.C. mirrors the shadow that would have appeared on the ground from the primeval sun in the ancient North sky. The Saturnic cults are worldwide. As above, so below. They celebrate the golden age of Saturn, and they wish to return to that time. Saturn, Satan. Trump's inauguration ceremony on January 20th, 2025, sworn in for his second term as president. Him and Melania are both wearing Saturn symbolism. Melania's hat is a symbol for the black sun. The brim of the hat casts a shadow over her eyes, symbolizing the wings or the horns of Saturn. Trump is wearing a purple tie, which goes back to the purple light of Saturn. His opening line in his inauguration speech, "The golden age of America begins right now." This is a reference to the golden age of Saturn. Most, if not all, of this information that we went over today has already previously been covered in my other videos. I just wanted to touch on everything again before we proceed further with this series, kind of help gather our thoughts as we continue forward. Bo knows Saturn? If you're a sports fan or old enough, you probably remember the Bo Knows Nike commercials. In Gematria, Bo Knows comes up as 594.99 in English and simple Gematria. Swoosh matches those numbers. In Golden Dawn, Bo knows the swoosh goes back to the Golden Dawn, the age of Saturn. The Nike symbol is a sneaky reference to the rings of Saturn. You know, Michael Jordan is known as his airness, or Air Jordan. Amun was also known as the god of air, and merged with Ra to form Amun-ra. The primeval sun is also known as the second sun. Look who matches King James. Second sun in English Gematria equals 684, and simple Gematria 114, matching the names LeBron James, who was the second anointed as the king of basketball. Remember, the Saturnic cult rituals associate kings with the first king of the air, Saturn. I'm not sure if y'all recall the "We Are All Witnesses" ads and the Welcome Home commercial for LeBron. It shows LeBron doing his pregame ritual of throwing chalk in the air and holding his arms out. The shape of his arms reminds me of the curves of the rings of Saturn, much like the minivist symbol. and a circular shape in the center? Is LeBron paying tribute to the Lord of the Air, the Primeval Sun? Are we all witnesses to the return of the Age of Saturn? I'm Bled Scry. Please like and subscribe, and continue with me as we explore this great mystery. Thanks for watching.